We had another wild weekend in the Big 12, which means it is time to do our Week 8 Big 12 power rankings. Welcome to Saturday's Warrior. If you are a fan of the Big 12 or BYU or just college football in general, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. So, when we do our power rankings, we try to really just clear the field and put them in there again. We're not really basing off of, okay, last week they were here, which means they moved this many spaces up or down based on a win. Really just try to clear the table and put where we think each team belongs at the moment, really based off of their record, their performance, but also what's happened lately. How is momentum moving them? How have things changed? So, without any further ado, let's just get right into it. All right, so OU and Texas were both on a bye week, so they did not move. Nobody did anything to change my mind that they belong in the top two. In fact, after these two and then a few teams at the bottom, it was really hard clearing out the middle and really putting these teams in order. So it was really just kind of how my gut felt on a lot of these at this point. So at number 3, we have Kansas State. And this is up. Last week I had them in the bottom half of the league. It really showed some slippage and maybe they weren't who we thought they were. Now, in retrospect, their 2 losses after this weekend were against teams who have some pretty good wins on their resume as of late, and this weekend included. And so I really think perhaps Kansas State is closer, probably not quite where we thought who they were preseason, but probably closer to that than who we thought they were after that disappointing loss to Oklahoma State last week. And speaking of which, Oklahoma State looks like they've figured something out. So they beat Kansas State, and then this week they beat Kansas, and they showed that maybe those struggles early on in the season, they still have to count against them, which is why I don't have them against Kansas State, even though they won the head-to-head. They still have, I think, some time to prove that they need to prove it to us that they are who it looks like they're shaping out to be, because some of those games were really bad, and that loss to South Alabama was inexcusable. So those still linger for me, but beating 2 very quality teams and teams that probably belong in the top 5 of the conference in 2 weeks in a row show that perhaps they really have turned the corner. And number 5, we have West Virginia. They took a bit of a hit this week after losing to Houston, but honestly, this wasn't a terrible loss. They showed some real grit hanging in that game. I mean, the problem is that they were in a close game against Houston, but we know that West Virginia lost some talent, that they weren't the most talented, but that they were outplaying and just really showing their grit and determination to win a lot of games. And they have some quality wins on their resume now against quality Big 12 teams. But going into Houston, I think maybe they hear too much hype. They go into a hostile environment against a team that's desperate to show they belong, and they played in a competitive game. They pulled out, a score almost last second, 12 seconds left, and it looked like they were going to win it. In fact, they got a little too cocky and started celebrating too early before they lost on a Hail Mary. By the way, always swat those down. You don't need the interception. Just hit it down. Anyway, so it wasn't it was against Houston, who is a bad team, but Houston has shown flashes this season. So I don't think it was the worst loss, but certainly wasn't good. And I think we knew that eventually, things would catch up with West Virginia. It's really at this point, we'll see how they proceed forward, if they're able to still continue to grind out some quality wins, or if they let this loss get to them. I think that they will show that the mettle that they have so far in the season. So I've left them at 5. I don't think they're too down yet from one loss. I still feel like they have the potential to keep this thing rolling. Anyway, enough about West Virginia. Number 6, we have Kansas. And now they did take a tumble. This is I know it's just 2 losses, and one was against Texas, and they hung in there with their backup quarterback. And then this week against Oklahoma State, again with backup quarterback, and Oklahoma State looks like that the Cowboys really have figured something out. So that might turn out to be not as bad of a loss as we thought. So I still think that Kansas deserves to be up in the upper echelon of the conference at this point. But if they don't get Daniels back, then I do. I don't think they completely drop off because I think Bean is still a quality backup quarterback, but their ceiling is definitely not nearly as high. But I do think that they will break the over under from the beginning of the season. At number 7, we have Iowa State still. I think that they've shown that they can compete and that they're going to continue to fight and claw to win games. And it started with their defense, but they've shown that they're figuring out how to put up points as well. So I have them there. At number 8, I have TCU again, and you think after the drubbing over BYU this weekend that they should move up, and perhaps I should have had them higher. Like I said, this middle of the league was so hard because everybody, it seems like, has at least one bad loss, and so it's really hard to figure out the middle. I still think TCU with their 3 losses, and they had a couple in a row, and I'd like to say that perhaps they've turned it, figured out and turned things around this week. But really, I think more of that was, it is some of that. I don't want to take credit away from them. They earned that win and they played really well. But BYU also, played very poorly. And a lot of that is on BYU. A lot of it's catching up, and they finally went up against a team that was ready for them, and they weren't able to capitalize on turnovers and short field position. So I still think TCU, I still have them, at 8. I think they could easily move up, especially because it seems like that playing with their backup, that the team has a little bit more buy-in, and that Chandler Morris perhaps is not the answer for them at QB. And so maybe they've actually lucked into a better situation. And if they continue to win with this, then I definitely think that they could be a top 3 or 4, at least 5 by the end of the season. At number 9, we have Texas Tech. This is, I think last week I started buying into the hype again, saying, well, look at their losses. They were all excusable losses now in hindsight, and not as bad as they once looked. But to drop a 4th one, and it looks like they're still figuring things out. So I still think they're on the bottom half, but they're one of those teams that could definitely come out and surprise anyone on any given weekend, I would say. And now we have BYU. They took probably the biggest fall this week for me. They just showed. I was talking about it all during the TCU part, but that they just have not been able to get out of their own way and figure out how to correct the problems that are facing them. And as they go up against tougher teams, their schedule doesn't get any easier. And the teams that looked like they were going to be easy, Texas Tech at home, maybe. But then after that, Iowa State doesn't look like a pushover like people thought at the beginning of the season. West Virginia looks really tough, especially in Morgantown. And so I Oklahoma State now too. And so I just think it's going to be hard for them to come by a whole lot more wins if they can't correct these things. And which at this point in the season, I would say we kind of know who they are. And so I think things are definitely trending down for BYU. At UCF on a bye week, they ended up staying the same. Houston, I move them up for sure. They were in the bottom spot last week, and they won over West Virginia, which is a good team. It took a Hail Mary to do it, so I'm not like flying them up the charts. They still are clearly a flawed team, but definitely deserve some recognition for that. And then Cincy at 13, they're also up against Iowa State, another good team, but they just haven't really had much going in recent weeks. But I put them ahead of Baylor because even though Baylor does have one conference win, a very surprising comeback win, when I look at this weekend in the head-to-head matchup, I think Cincy's going to win that, and therefore I'm putting them ahead of Baylor. All right, so those are our power rankings. Imagine that most everybody's going to have OU and Texas at the top and a similar look at the bottom, but it's those middle teams. I'm curious to see how you would rank power rank the Big 12 right now, but especially those middle teams. How do you have it shaping out? Because I went back and forth and moved these around a lot. And really just at the end of the day had to settle on something. So let me know how you'd rank it. I'm really curious to see. And be sure to like and subscribe the channel, and we'll see you next week.